So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to my iPhone 13 Pro Max 1.5 years later. By the end of this video, you're going to discover if this phone is still something worth picking up, and for those of you who just want to watch it for entertainment, you're going to find out how well this phone has held up over the 1.5 years it has been on the market. Now, because iPhone Pro models do hold their value super well, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a little bit more than this, and this is not too much less. So you can see right here, we're still around that $850 mark for this phone. Now, to keep that in perspective, let's talk about a little bit here what you'll get for that price brand new. You're going to get an iPhone 14 Plus. So this is what you would get brand new if you wanted an iPhone today at that price point. So we'll probably be referencing to that throughout this video just a little bit, so keep that in mind. You can see it does come in 5 different colors. You can get this in the Sierra Blue, the graphite colorway I have right here. It also comes in gold, silver, and a beautiful alpine green colorway, which I actually covered on the channel. I'll link that video down below if you want to see how nice that green colorway looks of this phone. But 1.5 years later, let's discuss a few quick specs you need to know. So we do have a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED ProMotion display on here. This was the iPhone that brought the 120 Hertz, and this has been game-changing for iPhone, making it feel much smoother. This phone also does have a 4323 milliamp hour battery on board, which is a pretty large battery for an iOS product because iOS is very efficient and it works very well. Triple 12 megapixel camera on board with RAW support. In addition to that, we do have a cinematic mode and 4K 60 video on both front and rear cameras. In addition, this phone also is going to give you that notch right there, so you're not getting your dynamic island. Do keep that in mind, but Face ID is present here. Other than that, those are kind of the main specs you need to know just about the phone's general specifications. Apple A15 Bionic, and it does have 6 gigabytes of RAM, so it's still pretty well loaded even though we're here in 2023. It doesn't even feel like, if this phone was still the current iPhone, I think Apple would still be fine. They could have kept this phone for 2 years and not even launched the 14 Pro Max, and I think people would still enjoy it. Honestly, that's how good I think this phone was. All right, so let's talk about the body and the build of this phone. So the weight of this phone, 240 grams, aka pretty heavy. We are rocking a stainless steel body on here, and you'll see that it definitely picks up smudges. We talked about that before. One thing about this phone is that the camera bumps are pretty much sticking out there. However, they're not quite as sticking out there as the 14 Pro Max. So 1.5 years later, this feels a little more sleek, but at the same time, it's still not super sleek because they still do stick off the body here. Now, the actual back material, sides, front of the phone, besides the notch looking slightly older because Apple did come out with Dynamic Island, the whole phone feels the same amount of premium feel. So if you just skip the 14 Pros altogether, the iPhone 13 Pro, the Pro Max here that we're talking about today, feels exactly the same. IP68 and dust and water resistance is still on here, so that's not any upgraded. There's basically no difference in terms of premium feel with this phone and the newer phone, which is really saying something about if you want to get this over the 14 Plus more than, if you should upgrade, because the iPhone 14 Plus at the same price, you'll get a phone with an extra camera and a more premium body with ProMotion. So that's kind of quite good there. So yeah, that's just about all I have to say about the body and the build. I just think you're getting a more premium feel than the 14 Plus, but it still feels just as good as the 14 Pro and Pro Max models. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the display quality here with this phone. So, you do have OLED and you do have the ProMotion display. Now, the main difference between this and current day iPhone or current day Pro Max is just the brightness. This phone can peak out at 1000 nits or 1200 nits peak, but 1000 usable. And the new one is 2000 peak. So definitely this one is less bright. However, that's not really a big deal because I was always able to see the iPhone 13 Pro Max in sunlight, and a year 0.5 later, there's nothing at all wrong with this because this phone is still brighter than 14 and 14 Plus models, which are newer phones technically than this phone, even though they carry the same chip. This one still has a brighter display than those devices do. So, I mean, this is still really, really good. It also retains the exact same, it does have the same exact PPI, so pixels per inch or sharpness of the text. So if you are reading articles and stuff like that, you are going to get the same exact sharpness of text on there. So do keep that in mind as well. This also does have a pretty sizable screen. So, if you want to pay $850 for this, you can probably get this with a good amount of storage for close to the price of a 14 model, a regular 14 model, that has more storage, and you'll get a bigger display. So still a very sizable display on board. The main thing you're dealing with here is the notch. So if the notch bothers you, this is probably not going to be the best phone for you. But for some people, this actually looks a little bit better than Dynamic Island. For me, I actually thought this was much less distracting than Dynamic Island that just came to the current iPhone. So for me, it's not a big issue. This also does have a ceramic shield glass, so essentially pretty durable. Although, as you can see, I did keep a screen protector on there because I find that even though they're marketed as super scratch resistance, these new phones, they still scratch. And when you're paying this kind of money for a phone, I want it to stay in tip-top condition for when I go to resell it in the future. So for me, I still kept the screen protector, but it's still a pretty durable front display that if you're okay with, hairline scratches you can barely see unless you put the light on it, you'll still have a very durable panel here on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So a year and a half later with software, there's not much to talk about, but other than that, we have the same exact software you'll find on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. You have 16.4. I do like how on 16.4 they have brought this section here where you can do beta updates, automatic updates. It's getting a little bit better. In addition, I do still enjoy, widgets support on iPhone, and the app library is quite nice how it automatically organizes your applications, but you get that on all iPhones. I still am a little bit disappointed that there's no split screen or way to multitask on this bigger screen. I just think it has the space to do it. I think that iPhone, when they finally bring a feature like that, it will come to probably the Max models or the bigger models. We might not see it on the smaller models, but we'll have to see what happens there. But overall, the software quality has been good. I haven't been actually dealing with any crashes or delays, anything like that. It has stuttered, it has lagged up before, one time the screen froze, but one time. So I really don't have much to complain about here with this software quality. It's been fantastic. And unlike before, I don't think Apple is slowing down iPhones. Some people think that they slowed down some of the older iPhones. I don't see that happening. So how many years left do you have with this? Well, if it's going on 2, you probably have a good 4 years, 3 to 4 years left on this phone. But considering, here's the cool thing about the 13 Pro Max. Because Apple decided to carry over the A15 Bionic into the 14, this phone right here will probably get an extra software update that you weren't expecting because Apple decided to keep that same chipset that was in this phone. AKA, they basically believe that chipset is so good that they were able to keep it for 2 generations of smartphone. So that's a good sign for you if you want to pick up a used 13 Pro Max, because your software will be updated once again when you want to go ahead and get that extra update that the 14 gets. I'm pretty sure this will get it because it has the same chipset. Same goes for the iPhone 13 models, the other ones, the 13 Pro, and maybe even the 13. So what has the performance been like with the iPhone 13 Pro Max? Well, you've seen plenty of my speed tests. It's been amazing, basically. And the only thing I gotta say that has changed with the iPhone 14 Pro Max is that they're a little bit quicker when it comes to if you're really pushing them. But I mean really push it. You gotta push them to the max type of performance, because everyday tasks will not feel any different on here than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I mean, if you were to find this thing on a deal, an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you basically just saved yourself $400 or $500 over buying a brand new iPhone 14 Pro Max, and you're getting basically the same phone. That is a heck of a deal for someone who can deal with not having a dynamic island, which sounds like a first world problem. Who really, do you really need a dynamic island? I mean, it's cool and all. The next iPhones will have it. Your phone will feel a little bit older as Apple starts to bring it to all the iPhones. But at the same time, you are coming up. You are coming up on a steal if you pick this, because the performance with that A15 Bionic, 6 gigs of RAM, clocked in at 3.23 gigahertz, combined with the fact that Apple continuously improves iOS and this phone continuously gets updates, has zero issues whatsoever when it comes to performance. So, I mean, really, what do you want? What else do you want when it comes to a phone? What else do you really want? Because I don't know about you. For me, I could never make this phone lag. I couldn't make a lot of my other iPhones lag, but this one specifically with the promotion really took it up a notch. Literally, like, took it up a notch in performance. So Apple A15 Bionic, still really good performance 1.5 years later. Again, if I had to only use this, if it wasn't for the channel, I would probably not even be using an iPhone 14 Pro Max. All right, guys, so let's talk about the cameras. They were a big deal for the iPhone 13 Pro Max, bringing you a awesome macro mode. And one thing I really liked about these cameras is they had a nice depth of field. So even when you brought stuff close, it would stay in focus, unlike the current iPhone 14 Pro Max, where if you bring things, the focus distance is longer. So a lot of people find that their photos are out of focus. The fact is that it'll switch to the macro mode and then you get that macro photo. But with this one, you could bring things a little bit closer, even on the main camera. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you do have the same 15 times zoom, and you do have raw photos as well if you want to go ahead and take advantage of that. The truth is the 48 megapixels is nice if you really need that sharpness and that you need to really tweak it and blow it up and stuff like that. But the majority of people don't even enable that modes, so I don't think it's a big deal. Honestly, pano, portrait, photo, video, cinematic, it's all here. You don't have action mode, which is kind of lame. I mean, if you want to do action video, you have to get the iPhone 14 models. But other than that, that camera has been amazing on here. It just does really good front video, really good rear photo, front photo. It's amazing. There's just nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I just don't think it's the sharpest camera on the market. There are sharper cameras, but the selfie quality, the skin tones, the speed of the camera, shutter speed, stuff like that, the ability to use it in a pro fashion, it's still here. Not the most versatile, not the longest zoom you'll find like on a Samsung phone. But honestly, 1.5 years later, it's still playing at a flagship level, which is good for you if you want to save some money. And it's definitely a tough pick between the 14 Plus if you want the 14 Plus's action mode, but you'll get ProMotion and telephoto zoom. So it's really up to you. Are you going to be using a GoPro-like feature? If not, this is the better choice for sure in the camera. Now the battery life on here has also been really good. I actually said 4320. There is a 4352 milliamp hour battery on this phone, and this phone has been some of the best battery life I've ever seen on an iPhone. It gets through a full day, and sometimes if you're not a heavy user, for a lot of people which aren't heavy users, we'll get 2 days on this phone. And if you're a medium user, you'll probably still get a day and a half, a day and a quarter. You're not going to kill this phone in one day, even with some pretty decently heavy usage. So do keep in mind, this is great battery life on this phone still. Just make sure if you're buying used or refurbished that you get a 100% capacity, but really, really good battery life. There's nothing really else to say. I do gotta mention one thing though. If you do put this in low power mode, we do get rid of the 120 hertz, so it kind of makes it feel like a 14 plus. You can also turn off 120 hertz by yourself, but if you really want to save some battery, you'll have to deal with that less than optimal, 60 hertz look compared to a 120 hertz smooth feel that you'll find on ProMotion. So do keep that in mind. But battery life, still very good here, 1.5 years later. So talking about the audio, this really hasn't changed much on my 14 Pro Max. I think the mics got a little better for recording audio on the 14 Pro Max, but the actual loudness and factor is not too much different. Also, the phone call quality and the reception strength is the same. We have 5G on both phones. There is an improvement to Bluetooth speeds on the new phone, but that's not something else that's slow on this phone either. It's just a bump on a new phone. This phone does still have some of the latest Wi-Fi standards, not 6E, but still pretty good with Wi-Fi 6. I will say though that this phone does not have the fastest charging. That is one thing that's lacking. It also does not have reverse wireless charging, but what it does have is a really good resale value. So if you want to resell your phone, this is going to be a good one to pick up. Even if you picked it up now, you would still get a decent resale value on this phone. Now, the iPhone 13 Pro Max features Face ID, no in-display fingerprint, but it works pretty fantastic. So I don't think you're going to be disappointed with that either. On the whole, I'm ready to wrap up my 1.5 years later experience. Keep in mind, SIM card tray is on board there. So this is no eSIM stuff. I mean, they have it on there, but you don't have to use it. 1.5 years later, it feels like this phone is still brand new. That's my best, statement I can make about it. It feels like I just bought it like last week, even though this phone has been out. There's been a phone that has succeeded it. It doesn't feel like they've changed much at all to really enhance the experience so much. Now, as a techie, I do appreciate the 48 megapixel on the 14 Pro Max, the brighter screen, the newer chipset. I can see the dynamic island differences. They're pretty cool, but they're just kind of there to make another iPhone upgrade. They haven't really been life-changing things that I've noticed, overall. So basically what I'm saying is if I was stuck on this phone, and I'm not saying stuck as is a bad thing, if I was still using this phone is a better way to say it, I would still be incredibly happy. And I'm incredibly happy to still recommend this right now as a good alternative option if you don't want to buy a new iPhone or you don't want a 14 or 14 Plus. You're going to get a heck of a phone right here. Just make sure you get one in good condition with a good battery capacity. Thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share your experience with the iPhone 13 Pro Max when you plan to upgrade, and if you've loved it and things you've noticed about it that I might not have covered here in this video. Thank you very much for watching. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.